And good morning. Welcome back to Brew with Bottle. I'm Liam, as always, and I'm pleased to say that I am here today with Callum Baxter, fellow shareholder. Callum, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm well, Liam. Great to catch up again. Thanks for inviting me to have another chat.
Not a problem at all. I see that your background has drastically changed since the last time I saw you. Where are you at the moment?
I'm on my boat in a marina in the town where we live called Albany in Western Australia.
Oh, it's fantastic. What kind of boat you got? Because last time I spoke to you, we were discussing that you might be getting one.
Yeah, I've been looking for a long time, and I found this boat late last year. I purchased it in November. It's an Incat monohull, 52-foot long aluminium hull. Incat are global. They make high-speed ferries and naval patrol boats. So this is well constructed and has a cruise speed of about 30 knots.
Oh, wonderful. But also presume it's happy enough just bobbing around whilst you throw the line out and catch yourself some dinner.
That's right. Catch a few fish and snorkeling and just generally exploring beaches and coves around here, which is fantastic.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm really pleased for you. Now, I wanted to talk to you today because on Thursday the 2nd, Greatland released the Jury Exploration Program update. And there were things in there that I kind of didn't understand and thought I really could do with this being explained a bit better. So I thought, who else better to talk to than yourself? Because if anybody knows exactly how this has all happened, it's going to be yourself. So I just wondered, Greatland have seemed to have focused preliminary, I can't even say that word. Greatland have focused on the bismuth that they have found. So I just wondered if you could sort of explain the process of in terms of how the bismuth and the gold and the copper and stuff end up where they end up, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So when a mineral deposit forms, it's basically because there's been fluids traveling through the rocks, and the fluids are often on high pressure and high temperature, and they've got a certain chemistry about them that they're carrying metals effectively, and they're also carrying a whole load of other elements, and in relatively higher concentrations than you would normally find. So that's what makes an ore deposit, is a high concentration of a certain type of material, such as gold, for example. And quite often in these ore fluids, there'll be other elements that are enriched as well. So and so quite often there'll be several elements which coexist with the ore mineral. So, and for example, at Havieron, we've got an enrichment in bismuth, which it is not super high, but it's sort of above normal levels that you would find in the natural environment. So if you're wandering around out there and you take samples of the sand, let's say 100 or 200 meters apart, and then you're starting to detect slightly elevated levels of bismuth, then you're sort of in a zone where the ore fluids have potentially been traveling not far away from you. So it helps you hone in on the deposits. And at Havieron, we recognised the bismuth association fairly early, and it's more associated with the higher grade mineralisation at Havieron. So, Greatland's update from last week saying that elevated levels of bismuth found in the hole at Black Hills. It suggests that there's the higher grade ore fluids have been travelling within those rocks there at Black Hills. So there's only one drill hole in that particular area at Black Hills from Greatland. So definitely worth following up, because it's a clue that there's high grade gold in that particular area.
So bismuth and gold, because I was looking at the period, the table period. I can't even speak. This so early for me.
The periodic table of elements. Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed that they're not actually. They're in line, aren't they? So is that how that kind of all comes together? Is that they're all part of that they're not part of the same family, are they? Because copper and gold are part of that same family. So
Yeah, well, quite often it's all to do with the chemistry of the ore fluids.
right,
You get elevations of sulfur as well, of course, and sometimes arsenic. But not in the case of Havieron though. But yeah, bismuth gets tagged along as well with
right,
these ore fluids, and so yeah, we actually worked out a proxy early on at Havieron for the high grade crescent mineralization where we were seeing a specific ratio, and because we were using the portable XRF guns on the core, which are notoriously difficult to detect gold with an XRF. However, we could see the bismuth with the XRF.
right.
So when we saw the bismuth, we go, okay, we're on the money. You can see visually the sulfides, and then use the XRF gun, and we could see sulfur and arsenic and bismuth as well. And so we roughly knew what level of gold was in it. And when the proper wet samples came back from the laboratory after crushing and dissolving the drill core through the machines, we were getting very close to what our calculations were telling us from the bismuth levels. Now at Havieron, there's actually several different phases of mineralization. There's the high grade gold with the high grade copper, and then there's the lower grade gold, which is still very good grades, but it's not in the hundreds of grams per ton. It's in the tens.
Yeah.
That's got a slightly different bismuth association, and that sort of suggests to us that maybe slightly different ore chemistry, because this system was alive for a long, long time, multiple pulses of ore fluids depositing different types of mineralization or different grades of mineralization in the system. So yeah, quite interesting, and it's a good sign for Greatland that bismuth is there at Black Hills, because it means that the really good ore fluids have been travelling through that area.
Is it possible that it's all coming from the same place, kilometers below the Earth? That it sort of, because it sort of funnels out. Is that something how this sort of thing would happen?
Well, yeah, it's postulated that the source of the mineralization seen at Telfer is from a granite that's located approximately 10 kilometers to the southeast of Telfer,
Right.
and it's highly likely that that is the same source for the ore fluids for Havieron as well.
Right. Okay.
Now, people could argue either way, whether it is or whether it isn't, but it's pretty important that, because these granites are the heat source and generating the fluids, which have then deposited the metals at Telfer and Havieron. So we're looking for these reduced hot granites, which are around in the Patterson. That's what makes the Patterson so fertile. It's the amount of these granites that have actually intruded into the rock system there, and it's also basically generated the Winu deposit for. These granites have generated the Winu deposit for Rio Tinto, which is about 100 kilometres to the northwest of Havieron. It would be a different granite up there creating the fluids, but nonetheless, there's a number of these granites around, which are the important key to creation of the deposits.
And then granite, is that a harder type rock? I'm really digging deep here on what I do know about geology. Is that a harder type rock?
Granite is harder than the country rock. Yes, it is.
Right.
But
Okay.
it's a magma that never actually pops out at the surface, so it's called a pluton. The fluid sort of might get to, say, within 5 kilometres of the surface, and
Okay.
it just sits there red hot, and then eventually cools off to create a solid lump of rock,
Right.
which
Okay.
is much harder than the surrounding country rock, which is sedimentary rocks.
Right. Okay. And I'm guessing that's kind of under pressure with the fact it's being pushed up from the Earth's crust.
Exactly. And so you get the pressure differentials, particularly when the granites and the magma from the Pluton hit natural faults or sort of breaks in the sedimentary sequence. And so then you start to invoke the structural controls, which are the pathways for the ore fluids, and then they'll find a trap site. So it appears to be what's happening at Havieron is that a large portion of the country rocks is sandstone, which has a high proportion of silica, and it's not very reactive. It's pretty hard to melt and react with silica, like silica glass. It's pretty much inert. Whereas there's other sedimentary layers there in the Patterson which are higher in carbonates, which are effectively seabed deposits of shells and limestone, and it's got a high carbonate or calcium content, and that is very reactive. So if you've ever seen someone drop some acid on some limestone, you see how it fizzes. So these ore fluids have basically wandered through all the sandstone faults and cracks, and then hit a more limestone or carbonate-rich layer, and then the ore fluids then start to react with the limestone and then dump out all the goodies, such as the gold and the copper.
Super. It's almost like you've read my script this morning, because that what is a trap site is literally my next question. So thank you for touching that now. How many years ago are we talking? I mean, this is hundreds of thousands of years ago, isn't it?
Yeah. That's right. If people sort of have a look at the papers that have been published on Telfer, and there's been some recent ones which are easily accessible, that gives an age date for Telfer, and it also gives an age date for the host rocks. So you could read across that Havieron's about the same age.
Okay. And is it possible, and this is just a question that just popped up in my head, that new deposits can still be formed in the modern day as the Earth kind of goes through its thing?
Of course, yeah. Every earthquake, I always go, well, there's a new ore deposit somewhere,
Right.
or the start of one. So, yeah, a lot of, to create the cracks and the rocks and stuff, which are the pathways for the fluid, quite often you need a bit of seismic activity. And it happens over a long period of time with like continents crashing into each other and things like that. So it's sort of a, it's 200,000 year process. But and multiple pulses of seismic activity, allowing the fluids to move around and hit the trap sites.
Thank you. That really that makes sense. I'm going to quote Greatland now. The strong buyer tenor of results at the drill site is particularly encouraging, given the Havieron is strongly demarcated with a bismuth halo, and there's a strong direct link between the bismuth and the gold in the ore system. And I'm about to ask, can you elaborate what this means? But you've already elaborated on that, because you've talked about the correlations that you guys came up with on that. So I think we've even answered that question.
Yeah. There'll be a as I said, if you took samples of the sand every 100 meters or so in a grid style fashion over the top of the deposit, you would end up with this big bismuth sort of bullseye,
right?
If you can understand that, so you'd have to start from several kilometers out, where presumably you get no bismuth, and then all of a sudden when you're sitting on top you get higher readings of bismuth, and if you just join the dots on the contours, then it would effectively map out where the deposit is. There's also other elements which are quite instructive as well. We did notice there's a fairly high level of zinc associated with certain parts of Havieron deposits. So along with bismuth, you can also use zinc as what we call a pathfinder element. So if you can't directly detect gold, then if you've got, say, 4 or 5 of the other associated pathfinder elements, then you're getting close to an ore system.
Yeah, I noted that they reported that there was, and I'm sorry if I say any of these incorrectly, gold, arsenic, bismuth, copper, nickel, lead, rubidium, antimony, samarium, tin, tungsten, and zinc. That's quite a range of metals, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. We were seeing ore-grade zinc intercepts in some of the Havieron core, and also the the chrome content was also coming up, which there's some of the nickel levels in the certainly the lower parts of the deposit are getting quite high, and it just shows how fertile these ore fluids were, because they're carrying a basket of metals,
Yeah.
and which then we try and extrapolate. Well, what was the actual? How do you generate those kind of elements by, what kind of rock do you have to melt to have high levels of gold, copper, and nickel and zinc, etc. So, it's we probably don't need to answer those questions, but quest of science, you always try and want to answer,
Yeah.
how work it out, how it's working. But definitely a fertile system, and there's a lot of tungsten around as well in other parts of the Patterson. So you use those elements to help you hone in on ore systems. But of course, you've got to see through the cover, and at Havieron, it's several hundred meters. But where the deposits are closer to the surface, they're easy to see with basic geochemistry, which is quite a cheap and fast tool to use.
Okay. So it's restrictive in some ways, having those 400 meters of cover. But I suppose in some ways that makes the challenge all the more rewarding when you find it, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, we were fairly convinced we could use mobile metal ion technology to see Havieron through the 400 meters of cover, and a lot of the other deposits in the Patterson are much more shallow. For example, Winu, and some of the deposits a bit further north from Havieron. Of course, Telfer pops out of the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how actually Newmont found it in the
Right.
first place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're getting quite good at exploring undercover now. And, of course, all the deposits that pop out of the ground have all been found. So, you have to get a bit smarter about detecting these things when you can't see them at the surface.
And I'm guessing once you've done all this and all this hard work has gone in, you can then transfer all this new knowledge to places such as Ernest Giles. Do you think that's a very different story, though, isn't it? It's a very different kind of rock down there. I was reading over the weekend.
Yeah, Ernest Giles is a different sequence of rocks. In terms of just general age, the rocks in the Patterson are Proterozoic age, and the rocks at Ernest Giles are Archean age. So they're much older.
Right.
And but all the rocks in the goldfields in Western Australia are of Archean age. Nearly every single greenstone belt within the Archean of Western Australia hosts gold to some level of concentration.
Okay.
Kalgoorlie, in particular, is a supergiant.
Yep.
And at Ernest Giles, it's the last unexplored greenstone belt in Western Australia, and it's under plus 100 metres of cover. And Greatland has a large land holding out there, which it's just a matter of finding the deposit.
Yeah, and I was looking through some of the historical data that's been released, and how you systematically went through various parts of it. It was suggested on one of the RNSs that you released that there's at least a 5 million plus ore body there. How close do you think you got to it? If that's a fair question to ask.
Yeah, I suppose I should slightly rephrase what you said, in that
Please do.
we're looking for a plus 5 million ounce deposit.
Okay.
Because really, with Greatland's dynamic, it was always about not just finding 100,000 ounces or even 1 million ounces. It was always about finding deposits that were actually going to shift the needle for even a major player on the planet.
Okay.
So we were always striving to find big deposits
Right.
in fertile areas, and that's the logic behind exploration in the Patterson and exploration at Ernest Giles. So we're looking for plus 5 million ounce deposits, and they have a certain fingerprint. And using certain exploration techniques, you should be able to detect whether they're present in that terrain or not. And I believe the work that Greatland's done to date have ticked that box to show that there's a high probability that there's plus 5 million ounce worth of gold in that area. And it's just a matter of carrying out further exploration to hone in on it. Now, we've had plus 1 gram per tonne intercepts in the basement
Mm-hmm.
at Ernest Giles already, and that is just from some very, very broad-spaced vertical RC drill holes. So it's just a matter of latching on to the main ore system now, which just means more drilling effectively.
So there's the possibility, I guess, that both Black Hills and Ernest Giles are not equally, but within a range of possibility of finding even more. That's quite
Oh,
exciting.
of course, yeah, very much so, and also in the same exploration update from last week, Greatland were mentioning the fine fraction soil sample results from the Patterson Range East tenement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very exciting as well, because you can clearly see two anomalies there. Basically, the fine fraction soils have returned elevated levels of gold in two areas.
Okay.
And they're not small, those areas. So that is definitely something to hone in on. And I'm sure that'll be part of this year's work program for the company, because you just can't ignore that. That's actually the meat and potatoes there. To me, that looks very, very exciting, along with the Black Hills results.
Yes. And so that's because I'm just looking at it now. What sort of test is that? Is that just sort of where they've taken a sample of the soil? Is that what you mean by that? Sorry.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
They've travelled along the existing access tracks.
Yep.
And taken samples a predetermined distance apart. And I'm not quite sure what the distance is in that case, but I think it may have been 50 metres or maybe 100 metres apart.
Okay.
And they take a really, as it says, a fine fraction, really, finer than a flour sieve kind of material, and then detect how much gold is there. And you're effectively looking through a cover sequence of plus maybe 20 metres of sand there. So you're looking for very small responses of gold, and there's definitely two sizable responses in separate areas there, which is quite exciting, really. Now the next step is to take further samples to try and contour it out.
Yeah.
And then potentially work out what the next strategy is from there, whether it's some ground geophysics or whether you just go straight to drilling.
Right. Okay. Speaking of that, in terms of the process, let's go back to Black Hills. What would as a geologist, what would your next move be for your drilling? Would you then be looking at your data to work out a series of sequences, or what would your next move be? Probably better for you to talk about it than me try and stumble through it.
Yeah, I think the rocks poke out of the ground quite a bit at Black Hills, so I think some geological mapping, and then also I'm pretty sure we've carried out 3D IP over that. And when I say we, pretty sure Greatland have carried out 3D IP over that area, which gives you a good handle on subsurface structure, and then further drilling, potentially some electromagnetics as well. That may help to try and pick up sulfide response, and then further drilling.
Okay. So it really is just a question of we think we found the haystack, and now we just got to find the needle, and we kind of know which part of the haystack to looking as well. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, as you can see on that picture in the Greatland announcement, Saddle Reefs area is just to the south, and we picked up gold nuggets off the surface there, and so we know there's mineralisation there, and we know there's one of these reduced granites in the very north west corner of that license block as well. So really where they've drilled the hole and got the gold response with the bismuth is the right location. So, your description of we found the haystack, yep, it's there. So further probably geophysics and drilling to locate where the biggest system is.
Brilliant. And now we've
It's
actually
not
picked
far
up.
away.
No, it's not. We've actually picked up the tenement directly adjacent to us as well to the north. So if we know the granite's in that top corner, there could be more prospectivity of more haystacks.
Definitely, yeah, it's great.
Super. Now, I would get hauled over the coals if I didn't bring up this next subject. Over the weekend, and now we have the information, it's been noted that Newmont have made an offer or two to Newcrest. I just wondered if you had a comment on that and how things stand from your point of view.
Yeah, exciting news over the weekend, and Newcrest has publicly announced that Newmont have made a bid for Newcrest. Just looking at a few notes here, Newmont's offered 16.9 billion US, and obviously Newmont's the world's largest gold miner, both by market capitalization and number of ounces produced every year. So Newmont have obviously recognised that Newcrest's slightly undervalued at the moment, and they like the look of their assets, which includes Telfer and Havieron. Now, it's a bit ironic that Newmont actually found Telfer in the first place back in the 70s, and for various reasons, the company Newcrest was born when Newmont moved on, or they actually were a major shareholder in Newcrest after Newmont moved out of that area in Australia. So for Newmont to come back in, they know the terrain very well, and they know the opportunities in the Paterson as well. But the Newcrest tie-up is not all about Telfer. It's also about other assets that Newcrest have, such as Cadia. So it's very exciting because in my 30 years in the industry, everything that I've seen Newmont do is exceptional. They're brilliant explorers. They're fantastic at production, and they're very focused on their shareholders. And management is always focused on running an efficient, safe operation. And for them to buy Newcrest and come under the Newmont banner would be transformational for the Newcrest management team and their workers and their assets. So for Greatland to be part of that process is very exciting and very positive news. I was also looking at some comments by trying to understand why Newmont made this bid at this particular point in time. And you can sort of see that potentially there's a bit of a softening in the US dollar coming through this year. And that means, it's all good news for gold price. So I think Newmont's looking at it as, there's a bit of a tailwind here. If we can get these assets at these prices now, then, we're going to turn them around and make them worth a lot more in the future. So, Morgan Stanley are forecasting 2,160 US gold during the course of this year. So Newmont's just trying to get in front of that. And I think it's great. Now, if Newmont want to hang on to Telfer and the Paterson assets, that's fantastic. And potentially they'll want to buy Greatland or Greatland's portion of Havieron in that process. So that's a win for Greatland. Alternatively, if Newmont don't want to pursue the Paterson assets, and that's an unlikely scenario, but nonetheless, I'd say Greatland would throw its hat in the ring to try and purchase those assets. Well, a scenario is that Greatland would purchase those assets from Newmont, and Telfer would become a central processing hub for Greatland, and it would make Greatland a mid-tier gold and copper producer, so a much larger entity, which is, again, a win for Greatland. So really for Greatland, the scenario at the moment is win-win.
Yes. I mean, if you're Sean Day and the team, and there's an opportunity that you could end up owning 100% of Havieron, you'd probably bite hands off at that, wouldn't you?
Definitely. That's right. Yep. Smaller companies can often run an operation much more efficiently than a larger company. But that said, Newmont is still fantastic at running their operations.
Mm.
They run the Boddington Gold Mine here in Western Australia, and they ran the Jundee operation in West Australia for many years, and they're just renowned as being the premier operators.
Which is awesome. I just had a question and it absolutely just disappeared out of my mind. I don't even know. I'm sure you even saw it go. No, I genuinely have gone completely blank. It doesn't happen very often. So when we've got a joint venture agreement like we do with Greatland Gold and Newcrest, is there ever any kind of planning that goes in case parties change or anything like that? Is that sort of thing ever spoke about? I appreciate you may or may not be able to even speak about this kind of stuff. But just thought I'd ask that kind of question.
Mm. Yeah, sure. In general terms, quite often when a joint venture agreement is put together, if one party wants to move on, then the other party has a right of first refusal.
Okay.
So, for example, if Newcrest wanted to sell, well, let's say Greatland wanted to sell its current proportion of Havieron to a third party,
Yeah.
then Newcrest may have the ability to match the offer from the third party as a right of first refusal.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Sorry.
Yes.
Did
Yes,
I
that
explain
does.
it okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I think since the last time we spoke, Andrew Forrest has waded into the ring with Whaloo and his
hmm
investment companies. Do you think he's going to have something to say about the Patson region if Newmont turn up?
Yeah, well, Andrew Forrest, again, a very good operator. And as you can see with his track record of Fortescue Metals Group, which has been very successful, and he invests in operations that can definitely be scaled up. And if you look at Greatland as a 30% producer from Havieron, there's a significant prize there, particularly when it goes into production, because generally when companies are going through this development phase, their share prices are somewhat depressed. But when production kicks in, you get a significantly high uplift in the share price.
I'm all
So,
waiting for that.
from that initial investment point of view for Andrew Forrest, that's very it'd be very rewarding for him.
Hmm.
However, there's several bigger pictures here where if for whatever reason Newcrest may decide not to continue in the Patterson, then there's nothing holding Greatland back from purchasing all the Patterson assets from Newcrest and becoming a standalone 100% producer from Telfer and Havieron itself. And now that's a much bigger prize for the likes of Andrew Forrest and those shareholders who are looking for a dividend return on an annual basis. So, there's a lot of good scenarios. Also, everyone may have noticed Rio Tinto's ambivalence about the Winu deposit over the past couple of years. It was a fantastic asset, but now they need a bit more time to think about it. Maybe it's not of a scale that suits a Rio Tinto to shift the needle on their underlying performance. So maybe Rio Tinto would be happy to sell that asset as well. And then Telfer becomes a central processing hub for multiple deposits on a very large scale, with infrastructure heading back to a deep water port at Port Hedland. And for Andrew Forrest, that is what's happening with Fortescue Metals Group in the iron ore space. Now, that can be happening in the Patterson, in the gold and copper space as well. And that's a potential scenario that could play out over the next few years. So if that happens, then the dividends are going to be orders of magnitude higher. But still, they'll be very nice. in the near future for Greatland shareholders, but it could go big time,
Mm.
and very exciting.
You could then have an armada of boats down there in the marina.
That's right. Well, probably, yeah. One boat's enough at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure the whole cleaning process takes long enough as it is. Um, and that's it, isn't it? Because Telfer's got two huge trains that are able to process millions of ounces of ore. But I mean, when you look at the starter plan for Greatland, it's no more than 3 million tons a year of ore that can be processed. So, as you say, to become a central processing plant for multiple deposits, it kind of makes sense in that way.
Mm. Yes. And so you start bringing in bulk tons. Telfer's rated at just over 20 million tons per annum. So if you push Havieron into a sub-level cave scenario where it's producing plus 5 million tons per annum, and then you put Telfer ore on top of that, plus Winu ore, then you could be easily pushing the 20 million tons, which is the existing capacity of Telfer, and that becomes a major producer.
Yeah.
And also, the important thing that everyone should remember is that Telfer's running now. It's already been built.
Yeah.
The money's been spent. It's not going to take years for permitting and engineering and getting it on site and building it. It's already there operating with multiple power plants, gas pipeline to the coast. It's ready built, turnkey, off it goes.
Yeah. And that's what makes Havieron such a great prospect is the fact that it's happened so quickly from you discovering it through to the fact that we're almost approaching the ore body and are getting ready to mine. It's normally a much longer
that's
process,
right.
isn't it?
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Well, I have actually run out of questions for you, Callum. Because the last part on there was us talking about when NCM. I mean, just as a brief question, could NCM, if they said no to Newmont for whatever reason, the shareholder say no to Newmont, between Wyloo and Greatland, they could actually make quite an attractive offer for Telfer and Havieron that then puts Newcrest into a cash positive situation. Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely. No, vice versa. Newmont might want to buy out Greatland,
Right?
and take the lot, or Greatland could potentially take the Patterson assets off Newmont.
Yeah.
So it's really a win-win whichever way it goes.
Do you think now's the time to get out a newer maiden resource estimate, or do you sit on the one that you've got, knowing that it's not making your ore body as big as it really is?
Yeah, well, again, this is where the Newmont bid works for Greatland shareholders,
Right.
in that if Newcrest are obviously going to have to defend the valuation and get their share price up. And the way you do that is by making your deposits look fantastic. So,
okay.
I think there may have been, less information in the public domain rather than more for Havieron over a period of time, and everyone really knows the true scale of the system there. Really, a mineral resource estimate is just a snapshot in time, and it doesn't really encapsulate the greater potential. But when obviously the data is shown to the likes of Andrew Forrest, and he goes, "Yep, I'm in," and it doesn't. Again, you look at today's announcement from Greatland of the extra executive appointments that have been made. When you really show people the data and the opportunity, it's very easy to convince people that Havieron is a very significant asset, and it's very large and contains a lot of metal.
Including, I'm pretty sure it's briefly touched on it, including nickel. There's an underlying nickel story. Do you know much about this underlying nickel story?
I do. I've seen the data up to when I was present at Greatland, up to the end of August in 21.
Okay, and does it make you really smile?
Well, yes, it does because no, there's but it's definitely not. It's exciting because it's a multi-metal system,
Right.
and as I mentioned before, there's some zinc in there, there's some nickel in there, but obviously the metallurgy at Telfer is slightly different. So if you did want to pull out the extra metals, then there'd be some plant modifications required.
Okay.
But that's achievable in this day and age.
Especially when you've got somebody like Mr. Forrest backing you that can lend you a couple of 100 million to build a plant that will then make that happen. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is probably a great place to leave our conversation today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your, I'm going to say busy day, um, to spend some time with me and the rest of the Greatland shareholders. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, just to sort of close out any comments or anything?
Again, thanks to the Greatland shareholders that supported us in the early days. We would never have made this discovery without your support, and I'm really heartened by all the support we got over the years. And I know it has been a slightly more difficult time for Greatland shareholders in the past couple of years, but the market hasn't been fantastic. But certainly everything's still going in the right direction for Havieron and Greatlands, and closer to production. So I'm still a major shareholder, and I'm looking forward to the rewards in the coming months.
Fantastic. Callum Baxter, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really do appreciate it. And to everybody else, thank you for tuning in and watching this. My name's Liam, and you've been watching Brew with Bottle.